Hello and welcome. You're watching World Panorama, where you get a complete overview of the biggest international news stories that unfolded this week. I'm Aishwarya Kapoor with you. Here is a look at this week's top headlines. Tensions between US and Iran escalate. US orders diplomatic personnel to leave Iraq, citing heightened threats from neighboring Iran. Also ramps up military build-up in the Gulf. Allies warn of an accidental conflict. Talks on forming democracy in Sudan put on hold after 9 injured in protests. Military and civilian opposition had earlier agreed on a body to run the country for a 3-year transition period until presidential elections. Donald Trump declares national emergency to protect US networks from foreign espionage. China the main target for US concerns, even as the two nations continue to escalate their trade war. And Alabama passes the strictest new abortion law in the United States, makes abortion illegal in virtually all cases. Doctors who perform abortion face up to 99 years in prison. Civil liberties unions call it unconstitutional to file lawsuits against the law. The US and Iran say that they aren't looking for a war, but tensions between the two countries have been building. This week, the State Department ordered several hundred US diplomatic personnel to leave Iraq, citing heightened threats from neighboring Iran. So far this month, the Pentagon has also sent a carrier task force and Air Force B-52 bombers to the region and dusted off contingency war plans. The US Treasury Department has also increased sanctions on Iran. But a few American allies have embraced the US moves, and several have warned that such aggressive action could lead to an accidental conflict. Even several Republican lawmakers have questioned whether the White House is overreacting to Iranian threats that have long existed in the region.
President, are we going to war with Iran? Hope not.
Talks of a war between US and Iran as tensions rise. On Sunday, US National Security Advisor John Bolton announced the deployment of the USS Abraham Lincoln Aircraft Carrier Strike Group and a B-52 bomber force to the Gulf. There were also allegations of attacks targeting oil tankers off the coast of the UAE that were blamed on Iran. Saudi Arabia also accused Tehran of being behind a drone strike that shut down a key oil pipeline in the kingdom. Saudi regime alleged that the drone attack was ordered by Iran and carried out by the Houthis. Then on Wednesday, the US claimed that there was an imminent threat to the US personnel in Iraq from militias allegedly controlled by Iran. The US ordered partial evacuation of its embassy in Baghdad. The embassy evacuation and the military build-up in the Gulf left many worried about a looming war.
We'll see what happens with Iran. If they do anything, it will be a very bad mistake if they do anything. I'm hearing little stories about Iran. If they do anything, they will suffer greatly. We'll see what happens with Iran.
Tensions between US and Iran have been growing since Donald Trump withdrew the US from 2015 nuclear deal JCPOA between Iran and global powers, under which Tehran curbed its uranium enrichment capacity and won sanctions in relief. Since then, US has slapped sanctions that have crippled Iran's economy. However, Iranian leaders, including Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei, have said that Tehran does not want a war. They denied Iranian involvement in attacks on oil tankers in the Gulf and on Saudi oil station, and charged that Washington was unnecessarily escalating tensions with Tehran.
We believe that escalation by the United States is unacceptable and uncalled for. We have exercised maximum restraint, as you pointed out, in spite of the fact that the United States withdrew from JCPOA.
Meanwhile, Washington's European allies have kept their distance, calling for calm and expressing concern over military escalation. Russian president said that Moscow was ready to assist its European and American colleagues in reaching an agreement with Tehran.
Посмотрим, что будет происходить.
Russia is not a fire brigade. We cannot save just anything. We have played our role. We are ready to play on this positive role, but it depends on all the players.
Anxieties are growing throughout the Middle East that the tension between America and Iran could quickly escalate into an all-out war. The main question is, would a direct, premeditated attack on US troops by Iranian proxies in Iraq and Syria draw the United States into a major conflict against Iran? Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. And now news from the US state of Alabama, where Republican-controlled Senate passed a bill to outlaw abortion, making it a crime to perform the procedure at any stage of pregnancy. The strictest in the nation, abortion law allows an exception only when the woman's health is at serious risk. The measure contains no exception even for rape and incest. Lawmakers voted down that amendment on Tuesday that would have added such an exception. Now, the legislation is poised for an immediate legal challenge and to be overturned at least by the lower courts. Alabama lawmakers have passed a bill to outlaw abortion outright in the state. The state Senate approved the law by 25 votes to 6, rejecting exemptions for cases of rape or incest. Republican Governor Kay Ivey signed the bill. The bill had been passed 74-3 earlier this month in Alabama's House of Representatives. The law would take effect 6 months after being signed by the governor.
25 ayes, 7 nays. The motion to table passes.
It goes further than legislation passed recently elsewhere in the United States to ban abortion after a fetal heartbeat can be detected, usually around 6 weeks into a pregnancy. Under the Alabama measure, provision of abortion at any stage in pregnancy could be a Class A felony. Doctors could face 10 years in prison for attempting to terminate a pregnancy and 99 years for actually carrying out the procedure. A woman who has an abortion would not be held criminally liable. The bill would allow abortion in cases where the mother's life is at serious risk. However, bill contains no exemption for rape and incest. Several American civil organizations have said they will challenge the bill in court within a few weeks should it become law.
What's at stake is the fact of women's rights. What's at stake is the ability of women to choose what they can do with their body. We've seen the escalation of women in politics and winning elections across the nation. The voice need to be heard loud and clear when it comes to their body. Most of all, I think that they have that choice, and I think that this bill is just wrong.
But supporters of the Alabama ban say that the right to life of the unborn child transcends other rights.
The Life Act is very simple, but also very powerful. A declaration that all life has value, that all life matters, and that all life is worthy of protection. I understand, like the others have said, that some oppose this legislation. I realize that some may challenge it in the court of law. But our job is to do what is right, not what is easy.
This bill is part of the multi-state effort to have the US Supreme Court reconsider a woman's constitutional right to abortion. The idea is to overturn a 1973 ruling that recognized a woman's constitutional right to end a pregnancy. The bill's passage comes amid a wave of anti-abortion measures in Republican-controlled state capitals around the nation. Legislation to restrict abortion has been introduced in 16 of America's 50 states this year alone. The flurry of measures has led the activists to warn that a swathe of US territory could become an abortion desert. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. And declaring a national emergency, US President Donald Trump on Wednesday signed an executive order barring American companies from using telecom equipment made by firms believed to pose a national security risk. Now, the order does not name any company, but it is believed to target a Chinese telecom giant Huawei. Shortly after the order was issued, the US Commerce Department also formally added Huawei to the list of companies that the US government considers to be undermining American interests. The executive order, along with Huawei's addition to the list, comes as Donald Trump is seeking to apply additional pressure on China in trade talks with stiffer tariffs affecting millions of dollars of goods. US-China tensions escalate after trade war talks fail to yield any result. On Wednesday, President Donald Trump declared a national emergency to protect US computer networks from foreign adversaries. The executive order signed by the president bars US firms from using telecom gear from sources that the administration deems national security threats. The order does not name any company, but is believed to target Chinese company Huawei. While White House officials declined to identify China and Huawei as the intended target of the executive order, the two nations have squabbled whether Huawei poses a spying risk to Western infrastructure networks. The company's CFO, Meng Wanzhou, was arrested at Vancouver's airport in December on a US warrant and is fighting extradition.
We're having a little squabble with China because we've been treated very unfairly for many, many decades, for actually a long time. And it should have been handled a long time ago, and it wasn't, and we'll handle it now. I think it's going to turn out extremely well. We're in a very strong position. We are the piggy bank that everybody likes to take advantage of or take from, and we can't let that happen anymore. We've been losing for many years anywhere from $300 billion to $500 billion a year with China and trade with China. We can't let that happen. The relationship I have with President Xi is extraordinary. It's really very good, but he's for China and I'm for the USA, and it's very simple. We are, again, in a very, very strong position.
Several countries led by the US have raised concerns in recent months that Huawei products could be used by China for surveillance. The US has also been pressurizing its allies to shun Huawei in their next-generation 5G networks. However, the Chinese tech giant said that restricting its business in the US would only hurt American consumers and companies.
The US is abusing its national power to constantly and deliberately smear and suppress certain Chinese companies by all means. This is not honorable, nor is it just. We call upon the US to stop using the excuse of security issues to indiscriminately suppress Chinese companies.
Apart from barring US firms from using telecom gear from adversaries, the US Commerce Department has also cracked down on Huawei, adding it to its entity list, which means Huawei cannot get technology from the US firms without government's approval. Huawei has been at the epicenter of the US-China power struggle that has dominated global politics over the past year. The recent moves worsened tensions between US and China, which had already escalated this week with the tariff hikes in a trade war. The US president has complained about China's trading practices since before he took office in 2016. The US more than doubled tariffs on $200 billion of Chinese goods on Friday, and China retaliated with its own tariff hikes on US products. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. Time to take a very short break here. More international news that made headlines this week coming up ahead. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. Welcome back after the break. Now, this week, Sudan moved an inch towards democracy as the country's military leaders announced on Wednesday an agreement with the civilian opposition for a transition period to form a civilian administration. However, a day later, the talks were put on hold after violence was reported in protests in the capital Khartoum, in which 9 people were injured. Both military and the opposition have blamed each other for the violence. The violence has cast a shadow on the talks that appear to be on course to reach a deal on forming a joint military-civilian body to run the country for a 3-year transition period until presidential elections. There is hope for some peace in Sudan. Sudan's military leaders, who seized power last month by overthrowing long-time ruler Omar al-Bashir, have agreed with the opposition groups to transfer power to a fully civilian administration. The country's military council and opposition groups agreed to a power structure for 3-year transition, according to which the opposition alliance would have 2/3 of seats on a legislative council, while the rest would be taken by parties not part of the alliance. The two sides also agreed to the formation of a sovereign council which will rule the country until elections.
It has been agreed that the transitional period should last 3 years. The first 6 months will be dedicated to signing peace deals for stopping war in our dear country.
Thousands of protesters have been holding a sit-in outside the army headquarters in the capital Khartoum for weeks, demanding that the army generals who took power after toppling al-Bashir on 11th of April step down. The army generals had initially insisted on a 2-year transition period, while the protest leaders wanted 4 years. At least 4 people died and dozens were wounded during protests on Monday. Now a committee has also been formed to investigate the attack on protesters.
I was hit. I have 2 wounds. They were useless because I am still not dead. I swear they were useless. The man who hit me, he was a sniper.
Protests are going on in Sudan since December 2018. The demonstrators took to the streets over a government decision to triple the price of bread. The protests soon grew into widespread anger against the president's 30-year rule. Anger mounted after dozens of people were killed during the anti-government unrest. Protesters then staged a sit-in from 6th of April outside military headquarters in Khartoum to demand the army force the president out. 5 days later, the president was overthrown by the military. A military council assumed power on 11th of April, but demonstrators stayed put, insisting that it transfer the authority to a civilian administration. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. And here is a look at some more international news stories in Global Buzz. India has joined a global initiative to curb online terrorism. A dozen countries and global tech giants, including Facebook, Google and Twitter, pledged on Wednesday to find ways to keep internet platforms from being used to spread hate and broadcast terror attacks. World leaders led by French President Emmanuel Macron and tech executives gathered in Paris and released a declaration called as Christchurch Call to Action. The declaration is named after the New Zealand city where 51 people were killed in an attack on mosques in the month of March while broadcasting the attack live on Facebook. The agreement aims to prevent similar abuses of the internet. British Prime Minister Theresa May is set for one last effort to save her much-derided European Union withdrawal deal. May will bring the deal back to the House of Commons in the first week of June, seeking the approval of the MPs. However, May has acknowledged that the deal was highly unpopular, which has highly been rejected 3 times by Parliament, and has said that she would resign once it is passed. Her own Brexit minister on Wednesday also admitted that the withdrawal agreement would be dead if rejected again. If May's plan is defeated, the UK is set for no deal or for Article 50 to be revoked. And North Korea has said that the seizure of one of its cargo ships by the United States was an illegal act that violated the spirit of a summit pact between the two countries' leaders and demanded the return of the vessel without delay. In a statement, the North's foreign ministry said that it rejected UN Security Council resolutions against it, with the United States cited in impounding the vessel as a violation of its sovereignty. The US Justice Department last week had said that it had seized a North Korean cargo ship that it accused of illicit coal shipments in violations of the sanctions after it was first detained by Indonesia in April 2018. And on to the other big story this week. Sri Lanka's government has said that the country is now peaceful. This after curfew was imposed for 2 days after communal riots broke out in the northwestern province. At least one person was killed and dozens of shops and mosques were destroyed. The attacks came during the Muslim holy month of Ramzan. The flare-up was the worst violence in 3 weeks since the Sri Lankan Islamist bombers blew themselves up in 4 hotels and 3 churches on Easter Sunday that killed at least 250 people. Remember, Muslim community accounts for 10% of Sri Lanka's population. Sri Lanka this week grappled with anti-Muslim riots. The unrest started on Sunday as mobs moved through towns in country's northwest, ransacking mosques, burning Qurans and attacking shops with petrol bombs. The violence taking place in apparent retaliation for Easter bombings by Islamist militants that killed more than 250 people. The authorities said that they were able to contain anti-Muslim violence by Tuesday, adding that all those responsible for rioting had been arrested.
We also ensured that those people who were behind these were arrested. And today, yesterday also last night, today, there is peace in this country. Nothing has happened. So we feel we can hold it. We feel that these are organized attacks on Muslim business houses, premises that are happening. And we will ensure that it does not happen.
Rioting north of capital Colombo saw police fire bullets into the air to disperse mobs marauding through several towns. Sri Lanka imposed a nationwide curfew for 2 days. Authorities arrested some 78 suspected rioters. The United Nations called for calm and a rejection of hate.
We have given the armed services and police full power and the responsibility to control this situation.
Residents recalled how the attackers threw rocks at houses and set fire to doors and possessions.
Neighbors saved my 1-year-old grandchild and my daughter-in-law by opening their doors at a desperate time.
They came suddenly. They went down the road throwing rocks at house. Then they returned and set fire to the door and our things. We couldn't go out because we were scared if we came out they would kill us.
Tension has been high since Islamist militants attacked churches and hotels 3 weeks ago on Easter Sunday, killing more than 250 people. Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe appealed for calm, saying the unrest is hampering the investigation into last month's attacks. He also visited the riot-struck town of Kuliapitia on Tuesday, saying he would not allow the lives of innocent people to be disrupted. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. That's all in this edition of the program. But before we go, take a look at how an elephant calf was rescued from a lake by the forest authorities in India's northeastern's Kamrup district. The baby elephant became stranded in the Deepor B lake after becoming separated from its mother. Thankfully, he was guided out of the water by the forest officials and the National Disaster Response Force with the help of local men with boats. So take a look at the rescue of this sweet baby elephant. As I take your leave, I'll see you next week with another edition of World Panorama. See you then. Bye-bye.